Righto, longboard terminology part 2. Yeah, making these videos to help try and explain some of the aspects of skateboarding, longboarding. This one's going to be about trucks. The last one was on wheels, so you can check that out if you haven't. But yeah, we're going to talk about trucks. Same as last time, some of the stuff you might already know, some of the stuff you might not. Like some is really basic, some is hopefully a little more in-depth. Some is technical, some is super simple. But so yeah, trucks obviously sit underneath the board. It's what your wheels sit on, and these are what make your board turn. So different trucks turn in different ways. You can do different things to your trucks to make them turn in different ways. So I've got a set of Paris V2s here as my sort of display trucks. But trucks typically come in two main parts. You've got the base plate and the hanger. The base plate is what attaches to your skateboard, and the hanger is what the wheels are attached to. The hanger fits into the base plate, the pivot goes into the pivot cup, like that, and the pivot is where your trucks turn. The Kingpin obviously is coming up here through the middle of the hanger, and the Kingpin is what your bushings are going to sit on. You see this one's got its bushings in, and the bushings compress as you turn on that pivot point, and depending how hard or soft your bushings are, depends how easily or how difficult it is to turn your truck. Also got washers on the outside of the bushings, and different trucks depend on where they need washers. Not all trucks need them on the base plate side, and yeah, washers, bushings. Alright, let's talk about hangers. Hanger width is measured from here to here, which is going to be where your bearing sits, so that's the width. And then you can actually have spacers. These ones don't, but you can have a spacer that's like a washer that sits on your axle, and that can change your width, so you can have a spaceable, adjustable width. And obviously you got the nuts on the end to keep the wheels on. There's not overly too much complication to do with hangers, it's just what the wheels sit on. The only real thing to talk about technical wise is rake. Rake is caused if you have your axle offset to the center of your hanger, as I understand it. And this affects how your trucks feel to turn. A raked truck is going to dive more. I always explain it as having like a exponential turning radius. Like the more you lean on your truck, the more it will turn. Whereas a rakeless truck will sort of have a consistent amount. You turn this much, it's going to turn that much. You turn a little bit more, it's going to turn a little bit more. A rake truck, if you turn this much, it's going to turn that much. If you turn that much again, it's going to go even more. A little complicated, but that's what rake is, and that's what's caused it. Base plates. Base plates are measured in their angles. So this is being a Paris truck. Actually says on it, this is a 43 plate. Typically, most longboard trucks are around that 45 to 50 degree mark, and that angle is this angle of the Kingpin here. If you think vertically would be a 90 degree angle, and horizontal would be a 0 degree angle with your board, and so 45 being in the middle, the 50s are about there. And so you can run what's called symmetrical trucks, which is when both Kingpins are the same angle, when both base plates are the same angle. You can run split trucks, which is when one angle is different to the other. And this would normally be a high angle in the front and a low angle in the back. It's typically what you would run for a split. The other way around, like if you ride a split setup backwards, it's going to feel like a forklift. A higher degree is more turny, and a lower degree is less turny. So you want your higher degree in the front and your low degree in the rear. I briefly mentioned it before, but obviously the hanger has a pivot on it, and it goes into the pivot cup on the base plate. Pivot cups are actually made of urethane. You can kind of see the Paris one's not super obvious, but this ring here is actually a urethane cup that sits in the base plate, and that's so that the pivot on the hanger is able to turn and slide on it smoothly. If it was metal on metal, it would be scraping and grinding. There's a few different variations of this in different trucks. Some use bearings or different shapes of pivot, but that's your typical one is going to be a urethane pivot, and that's something that will wear out over time. It takes a long time to wear out a pivot unless you skate really aggressively, but you can buy aftermarket pivots or replace your pivots as needed. Let's talk about bushings. So the bushings sit either side of the hanger. If you imagine that you're turning, leaning, you're pushing and compressing against those bushings. And so bushings are made of urethane, similar to wheels. They're also measured in A, like a number and then A, same as wheels. So I think the sort of main area for bushings is around 75A through to like 97A or so. That's the sort of main area most people's bushings are, with your middle ground sort of being about 90A. Bushings come in all sorts of different colors. These are all Venom ones, and the Venom ones are color coded, so I know that this is an 83A and this is an, sorry, a 93A and this is an 87A and this is an 85A, just by color. Different brands have different colors and different ways of doing them. I just stick with Venom because it's easy to remember which one's which. There's a variety of different brands and styles of bushings. Most trucks just use a regular short bushing. If you're getting more into downhill and the racing trucks, those are going to be using tall bushings. So I've got a short Venom and a tall Venom 85. You can see one's taller than the other, same width, but just different height. And that just depends on the geometry of your truck, which bushing you're going to need. Tall bushing, there's more urethane to squish, so they're going to have more room to sort of lean and feel more turny. A short bushing has less and it's going to compress quicker. But yeah, harder bushings don't compress as easily, therefore make your trucks turn less. Softer bushings, like they compress a lot more, which allows your trucks to be more turny. So same as the split thing, if you're going to have different ones, you're typically going to go for softer bushings in your front truck and harder in your back truck. A little maintenance tip, there's some things you can do with bushing to keep them running well, is it's good to put some lubricant in there. The one I use is soap. Learned that from a friend, that every now and then if you happen to be taking your trucks apart, just put a little bit of soap in between the bushing and the base plate, or in between the bushing and the hanger, or around the kingpin. Just keep it a bit lubricated. Bushings will over time get munched, as I like to call it, which is when they get all torn up and chewed up from the, you know, the metal constantly pushing against them and squeezing them. Truck related is risers. So this is a piece of plastic that will go in between the truck and your skateboard. This is going to bring your whole ride height up. It's obviously rising you off the ground. People often use these to stop getting wheel bite if they feel like their wheels are too close to the board. And wheel bite is where your wheel touches your board when you turn, which obviously like puts the brakes on effectively on your wheel and can cause you to fall off abruptly. And yeah, wheel bite's not fun. So people often use risers to counteract that. Some people just like how risers feel, as it affects the way the trucks feel because it's pulling you further away from the truck. Yeah, that's risers. Something that's kind of funny with longboarding is that like people who only know street boards will often tell us how trucks are on backwards. That's because on skateboards, their trucks are called TKPs, which stands for traditional kingpin. And that's their traditional geometry of a truck, and the kingpin faces the other way. For a longboarding truck, we have that sort of 45-50 degree angle typically, and the kingpin faces the other way. So you want to make sure your truck is actually kingpin facing out, I guess you would say, out from the board. So all longboard trucks, the kingpin's going out, unless you start getting into some of these weird ones. Like I know Rojas are the other way, but that's different. But yeah, so that's the difference between TKP and what we call RKP, which is reverse kingpin. So the kingpin is reversed to the traditional. So longboard trucks are normally reverse kingpin, and that's what RKP stands for. So there's three main methods for making trucks. I guess you could call it like the construction of a truck. We call those cast, forged, and precision. A cast truck is where the trucks have been made by a process called casting. Casting is when you melt down whatever the media you're working with is and put it into a mold, and then that sets, becomes a solid, and that's your thing. So with trucks, most of them are aluminium or an aluminium alloy or whatever, until they have like all the liquid aluminium. They'll pour it into their mold, and then when it sets, that's your truck. The benefits of this is that it's easy, it's cheap, you can mass produce a lot of trucks quickly, but when you cast something, the metal is not as strong, and so your cast trucks aren't going to last as long. They're more likely to bend or even break in some cases. The other downside of casting is that it's less accurate. When you're just using a mold, it's not as easy to get that precise exact measurements every time. So your trucks aren't, like, they're going to say they're whatever width and whatever design, and you know, the engineers would have designed them some nice way, but it's not guaranteed to come out exactly like that. Like, the margin of error is not overly small with casting, but you get cheap. So that's why a set of like Paris trucks is, I don't know, like, what are they, 60, 70 bucks these days? Maybe not even that. Because it's cheap to make, but it's cheap quality. The next one is forged. So forging is a process where you basically like smash a hunk of metal into the shape you want. So this sort of, as far as trucks are concerned, this eliminates that strength side. Forging makes a very strong metal, but it's still less accurate than precision trucks. So we'll get to precision trucks, but yeah, forging, your trucks aren't going to bend as easily. They shouldn't snap, like you would hope they wouldn't snap, but you're still not going to get quite as precise or quite as accurate as a precision truck. Now, a precision truck is typically made using a CNC process, and the way that's done is they have a chunk of metal, they have the design on the computer, and your machine cuts out the shape of your truck from a chunk of metal. This makes it extremely accurate and extremely precise, thus precision, and it's also the strongest way you can have a truck, because the metal hasn't been affected other than being cut out of a block. So precisions are the high-end trucks, the most expensive trucks, but they're going to be extremely precise. They're going to do exactly what they were designed to do, and they're just basically never going to break. I've got a set of K4s here that I bought in 2015, and aside from a few scratches and looking a little old, like, these theoretically should perform identical as to when I bought them, and I've been riding these pretty hard. I rode these pretty hard for like 5 years straight. I don't know how many miles of skating I put on these trucks, but because they're precision, they're CNC made, they should be exactly the same geometry as when they were made. Whereas I have a set of Paris V1s that were my first trucks, and when I bought them secondhand, they were already all bent out of shape and different, and by now they're like, the hanger goes like this. It's completely wrong. So that's your difference between cast, forged, and precision trucks. Now for some more sort of like slang terminology of like how we describe how trucks feel. We talk about lean, and that's, again, it's kind of obvious, but at the same time maybe it's not. But lean is how much do they lean over. So if you think you're standing on a skateboard and you can lean over, some trucks will sort of just stop right away, and others will just keep going before you feel like you're going to fall off the board. We'll talk about how leany a truck is, so more or less leany. Dive, if a truck is divey, it means it sort of falls from being at center point to the side. It doesn't sort of smoothly go like this. It doesn't lean slowly. It dives quickly. So that would be a divey truck. Twitchy kind of like, it's a bit more self-explanatory. Does the truck feel like it's twitching around and moving around under your feet as you're skating, or is it sitting solid? You could also say like a twitch is if you see someone skating and then their board goes like, whoa, like this, that would be a twitch. Some trucks can feel more twitchy than others. If your bushings are too soft for your weight, a truck could feel twitchy. If you try riding someone else's board and it's dialed in for them and not you, their board could feel twitchy if it's, again, too soft or, yeah, just different to what you're used to. Smooth, it's kind of in the name. It's like, how does it feel to turn, especially carve on? If it has a really nice center point, you can feel the bushings aren't creaking or making any weird noises or, you know, having more resistance than you would want. That's going to be a smooth truck. And the last two things I would say would be, a truck could be either dead or responsive, and that's when if you imagine you're going in a straight line and then you decide you want to turn, a dead truck is going to not really turn or not really feel like it's turning, where a responsive truck, it's going to whip right under your feet and do what you want it to do. So responsive is kind of like twitchy, but responsive is more when you want the truck to do something, does it do it, or does it feel like you have to push it? A dead truck is going to like not feel like it's going to move, and you're going to have to really aggressively lean or throw your ankles or turn it to try and get it to move. Yeah, that's some information, some terminology on trucks. Hopefully this was helpful. I'm sure I missed a ton of words, so like last time, like chuck them in the comments, anything to do with trucks, terminology, how they feel, how you used to describe them. Chuck it in the comments, let me know. Yeah, if you didn't watch the wheels one, check that one out and stay tuned for the next one.